Hello everyone, I'm James Milan and this is Talk of the Town. As you probably know, if you have been watching before, on Talk of the Town we like to go out into town talking to local officials and also to folks who have newly assumed or relatively recently assumed positions of import in the community. And we are here in the school committee room at Arlington High School for a conversation, with Don Carney. And Don is the new director of world languages for Arlington Public Schools. Don, thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, get to know you a little bit, and share that with our audience. So, in order to do that, we're interested first and foremost in what your own history, your own professional history in the field of world languages has been. So, why don't you tell us?
Okay, so in my heart, I'm a middle grades French teacher. But I have spent the last 25 years in world language education. I was a French teacher for about 15 of those years. I started in private school, went to public school, became an elementary immersion teacher, back to public school, and then I've spent the past 9 years as an administrator of a world language program in another district.
When you say that for the last 9 years, and I know you come to us from Brookline Public Schools, when you say you were administrator, does that mean that you haven't had a chance to be in the classroom now for
9 years?
A while?
Yes. So two things about that is all of the K through 8 curriculum coordinators in Brookline are strictly administrative positions as they cover 9 grade levels in 8 schools, which currently is across 9 buildings. But those positions don't involve teaching, and that's something, in fact, that I try to reconcile it every year, but something that I'm particularly excited about in Arlington is to have an office in the high school and be surrounded by kids, and of course I'll have an opportunity to be in the middle school as well, because my position covers grades 6 through 12.
Mm-hmm. And that will allow you to have kind of direct contact with the kids.
More direct contact. Having an office in the high school automatically means that I'm surrounded by kids all the time, and the excitement and the pulse of a high school. I think that middle schools and high schools are really cool and fun places to be, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, we were discussing before we went on air that that energy that really happens when the kids first walk into school each year is always kind of a regenerative force for those of us who are teachers.
For everyone.
Yeah, exactly, for everyone in the building, of course.
Right.
So just to clarify though, your position here as the director of the program means that for the time being at least, and possibly for the foreseeable future, you won't be able to operate in the classroom directly, but rather will be making the curriculum or supervise. Well, why don't you tell us?
Right.
What you'll be
so
doing.
the position does include a teaching block, or a point 2 as we refer to it. This year I'll be supervising the students who are taking online language learning courses. I'm continuing a path that the previous director was on, and the future will tell. I'd like to think about the chance of being directly in the classroom and enjoying the opportunity to just get to know more about the system and our program this year. I think usually that tends to be at the high school, but if there were a need at the middle school, I think that it takes looking at a department as a whole and seeing, where the demands are and how they're sort of best met. I think that's one of the fun strategic parts of being a department chair also.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You get to look at, you're looking at things from a variety of perspectives.
And you had mentioned that you will be supervising students who will be doing online courses for their language acquisition. I remember, I've not been teaching myself now for about 4 or 5 years, but for a number of years just before I stopped in the school I was teaching Spanish in, we were looking at greater and greater integration of online resources in the language department. in our own school. So I assume that was also happening in Brookline while you were there. Is that right? Or?
I can't speak, in Brookline I was K through 8, and there's a very different approach with technology in general, just in terms of resources that are available in order to have equity across a school system. What are the resources that are available in each school? And in order to achieve oral proficiency, which is the goal of language learning, as you know, technology can serve a role. It can be a tool, but it's not always the most effective tool in terms of generating oral language practice and spontaneous conversation. And that's the true definition of communication, right? Interpersonal is that ability to spontaneously interact with somebody and get your point across, even in as bad as form as it might come. One thing I'd like to clarify about Arlington, however, is that we have some online language learning options available for students, but they are for elective credits. Okay. That's a program that the previous director established. I'm really looking forward to getting to know more about those courses. It's through Brigham and Young University. So what's nice about it is for typically upper level students who are interested in learning a language that we don't offer here. And it's a tool for us to use in some other instances, but that's primarily how it's used right now.
And one of the things I could have asked you much earlier is, well, what languages do we offer here? I'm going to guess that it would be Spanish, French, Latin, and perhaps Mandarin.
We have Spanish, French, you did say Latin, and Mandarin. The additional language that we have is Italian.
Oh, I see.
That is not currently offered at the middle grades. It was started under a grant, and so that is something I'm still learning about. Actually, I don't know enough about the Italian program and its funding source.
But is it a program that I know that students in general for the other languages can probably go from level 1, the beginning level, through level 4 or perhaps 5, I'm not sure, while they're in high school. Is Italian also offered at all those different levels?
Right now it is. And one of, I think, a specific learning for me is understanding, given the number of students that we have at the high school, what does a robust, well-developed, well-articulated language program look like from grades 6 through 12? And I know, again, these are the languages that we have, and we have strong numbers in them and students interested in learning. How do we keep them robust and functioning well with good outcomes for kids? And that's just all of the learning that's out there for me right now.
One of the things I was just wondering about, how much you've had a chance to think about this at all, and whether there are plans in the work to change or expand this program. This ties into what you were saying earlier, and I couldn't agree more as a person who taught a language for a long time, that the last pieces of the puzzle are really the ability to communicate extemporaneously, spontaneously, hopefully in in an immersion environment where you really don't have too many choices. If you want to make your needs or feelings or opinions known, you're going to have to figure out a way. That's always been, I found, the most effective means to cement all the studying that the kids do. And for us in the school that I worked in, the study abroad, the student exchange programs that we had to France and to Spain were absolutely integral and fundamental to that. So I know that I think that there are exchange programs here as well. What form do those take currently, if you know, and do you know whether there's any plans to either expand that to languages that aren't currently covered, or expand the trips as they currently exist?
Last year there was a French exchange trip. I can't tell you any of the details, but I know that it happened. And next week, the Spanish exchange students arrive.
Wow.
So there is a Spanish exchange program. What I don't have a lot of detail on is what's our history of that, of either of those, as well as I believe it's Latin and Italian combined, are traveling to Italy this year. So those are the sort of departmental trips. I think what makes the most sense is for us, these are all volunteer activities that actually teachers take on. There's not, I don't actually know if there's any stipended, but even if there is a stipend, the amount of work the teachers put into arranging, scheduling, and the responsibility, frankly, that they take on for students traveling abroad is tremendous. And I think we would both agree there's not often a deep understanding of what teaching looks like in the big wide world. But in general, I think that's just really outstanding and amazing work that is done. And it's hard to express how much time and an organization that takes. That really is, it's about their passion to make sure that kids have that kind of experience that typically comes from the teachers having had an experience and that unlocking something for them, or in the case of native language speaker teachers, to be able to share part of their own country's culture or a country that speaks the language. It's another way, I think, for them to really very personally connect with students. And for me, I just know my own time studying abroad, which was not in high school. Those are deeply seared memories and feelings. And so there's something incredibly magical about it on many, many levels, not the least of which is the opportunity to communicate and to be in those real life situations using their language, but it's so much more. I think it's exciting to think about, well, what other trips could there be? And in terms of capacity, I think that, trips for the languages that we teach and for the teachers who take on all that extra work to make them happen, that's probably what we'll limit our sites to for now.
Yes, and that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, let me ask you, I know you're familiar, we were talking about this earlier as well, that you're familiar with the recent explosion here in Arlington in school enrollment, and also that you're coming out of a system in Brookline in which that's been the case for quite a while there as well. I'm wondering if you have an idea of what the average class size either is going to be or what you're aiming for or hoping for language classes, and whether that's similar to what you already had experience with in Brookline, because I think that, I don't know, but my sense would be that teaching a language course to an average of 20 students versus an average of 30 would really be a fundamentally, you might want to take different approaches.
Absolutely. I think we have to be clever when we have a class of 30 or 27 or 28, like some of the classes are right now. And I would hope that it doesn't change the approach, because the pedagogical and the instructional approach, that's what we don't want to change. It's, the being clever is about management, and as a teacher, you cannot possibly record 28 students speaking and think that you're going to listen to that and be able to give kids feedback, right? Like in the days when you and I were teaching and we did that, those have long passed. We have to be, if we stay there, I think we're not able to make as much progress for students. Students aren't able to make as much progress because we can't possibly give them enough speaking opportunities that we're going to give them feedback on if that's our model. So I think that, yes, there's a lot of things that you do differently, and I don't know that there's so much about effective language instruction, rather about how do we learn to be effective teachers for students of 28. That's not something that I have a ton of experience with, right? And I want to support folks in being effective teachers, period. And I think that if we do have, class sizes of 25 to 30 in the middle grades and the high school, that those are things that we can embrace together as school learning communities, particularly administrators, about how do we support teachers in being effective with those group sizes, because I believe it's possible, but it might be a shift that we all have to get accustomed to. How do you figure out the balance, and I'm sure this is true for all directors, how do you figure out the balance of how much of the curriculum you are going to be shaping and how much autonomy each teacher has in his or her classroom? How does that work? I think it's a great question, and would imagine it's the question on the forefront of most of the world language teachers' mind. While we've had one meeting, it's certainly not enough time to delve into that. But curriculum doesn't come from a director, is my belief. We have state standards, we can have curriculum, we can have objectives. What's lived in the classroom is what actually is being taught, regardless of what the curriculum says. And I believe that it's that collaboration between teachers and director that has potential to unlock, a terrific curriculum. There's certain qualifications that I needed to have to get this job, and there's experience that I have in curriculum development that was hard won. I think no one knows how hard curriculum development is until you start to do it. True curriculum development, to have your own local curricula is something that is, wow, it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of work on teachers' behalf, because you can't teach what you don't understand. So if the curriculum is designed to achieve certain outcomes and you don't understand the curriculum, you will never achieve those outcomes. So then it just becomes a not lived curriculum, and it's worthless. In terms of really, I think making our objective in education period is to, this is about student growth and student progress, and it's not only in our one curriculum areas, because there's all of the skills that cross across curriculum areas. So I think that my job, the way that I perceive my job, is to understand what the curriculum is that is existing now, how it was developed, and there is really nice curriculum that has been recently developed, a shift toward more thematic units, really focusing on oral communicative proficiency, and that shifts the way that we taught language. When we opened the book and we covered all of those chapters while still doing a good job of getting the kids speaking, it's really quite the opposite of that. There's been, I think a fair amount of training done with the staff here, and some who have chosen to go further, and volunteers to develop curriculum. So from the grassroots level, I think a lot of those things are in place and have been in place and are working. So I want to leave those in place and see how they're working. I need to wrap my brain around the actual curriculum, which I think is a little bit less important in terms of prioritizing. It's important for me to understand that, but to see how it's being carried out and learn and hear from those teachers, I think is almost more important in terms of the short term. And then I really do believe that it's an extremely collaborative effort. I'm leading it. I have to make sure that we understand that we're on the same page about what the outcomes are, and then give folks to go some time and space to go and develop some of those outcomes, and then come back and check in, so that it's just like it's just like teaching and learning. It's at a different. It's not in the classroom, and it takes a different, more collaborative, adult learning shape and form that is, we're learning together. If I'm not teaching the curriculum, I'm having a completely different experience with it than the teacher. So I need to be present in their classrooms and seeing it in action, and I need to hear from them. I think there's a lot of space for teacher autonomy, but we have to be clear about the outcomes, and we have to be clear about there's autonomy within the realm of what we know are research-based effective practices. So if it's new to you and you're not sure what that means and you're not sure that you believe it, that's okay. You need some time. I can put you in the path and help you read and learn and practice and try things out until you believe it. And I've had teachers work with me in the past say, I don't believe that. It's like, okay, I need you to go and find your research that's supporting your argument. That, it's not just because I know better. That's not what it's about. It's how do we all become engaged in being as aware as we can of the research that's out there. I think that's part of my job, is to make sure that I'm current with all of that and leading us in that direction. And that's what I think is exciting for teachers, is when they're faced with, when they're able to have that kind of learning for themselves, which is, oh, there's research, okay, I want to learn about that. And still be able to, have some be able to speak freely, firstly, to say, well, I'm not sure if that's going to work for my kids or my class, because they know them best. But to appreciate that, we're going to hold a couple of things together, which is you're going to try something that's an effective practice, and we're going to see how it works for your kids and adapt it and make it right for you and for your students. And that's where there has to be autonomy every single day, every minute, because if we're not reacting to the needs of our students, then we're not teaching effectively for them, right? So it's having curriculum, it's standards, curriculums, and outcomes always at the forefront of our work, and then developing some ease in being flexible and figuring out the balance of what to do on the day-to-day with the 25 or 30 kids who are seated in front of us right now.
In your opinion, how does language instruction and let's say cultural education, so in other words, using the opportunity that you have in studying at least living languages to also introduce a kind of cultural education. How do you see those two things, relating to each other?
I think the definition of language is that it is culture, right? Like they are inherently connected. Language and cultures cannot be separated. When I first learned language and when I first started teaching language, culture was always something that was on the side and that we did separately. And I struggled to figure out, how would I incorporate all of this cool cultural stuff that you wanted to do, but somehow wasn't in the curriculum. And while our standards came out in the 1990s, I think our field was late to the standards. And we're picking up speed, which is exciting. And the standards are the 5 C's of the National Language Standards. So there's communication is number 1, and culture is number 2. So part of what we know now to be effective language instruction is having students work with authentic documents. So a document could be a video and any authentic piece of material, and not say anymore like, oh, but they can't understand this is too hard for them, that we ask them to do different things with it, that we adapt the task and not the text. We can ask students to do increasingly more complex tasks with those authentic documents. So you might use a document and level 1, 2, 3, and 4 and have them do different things with it. So it really does become about infusing the culture, because what do you see in a picture? If you see a drive-through Starbucks, what is that? That says a lot besides coffee shop, right? But if we put up culturally reflective images of coffee in different cultures, and we're going to see very different things. And when you see a drive-through Starbucks, that's very different from the espresso cup on the cafe table or at the cafe bar that you're going to see in a stereotypical scene from France. So I think that, in our field as a whole, and what I know to be true in Arlington, is there has been a focus on a deep understanding of the standards, most importantly, oral proficiency, and the use of authentic documents and the use of the target language. And those are coming all together to have culture be infused. And I think there's really exciting potential to actually have culture be a theme of a unit. And I'm just not sure, how far that little slice has gone. But I certainly know that the use of authentic documents is really getting people, I think it's opening up excitement for both teachers and students, because it really does get us to see a glimpse into, oh, that's what, 15-year-olds do in X country, or that's an advertisement on a bus. Like, oh, we would never have something like that here. Cultural comparisons are incorporated in the AP exam as well. So when we're teaching in a well-articulated program, we're working backwards from that. And so you don't wait to infuse it when they can get it. We have, I think we started to shift that model a long time ago. So that is a very long answer to your question.
No, a very good one as well. I wanted to, I may have mentioned earlier, one of the things we also like to do as part of these conversations is move beyond what is clearly your mastery of the professional components of what you're doing here, and to find out a little bit about you as a person, share something much more personal, or more personal anyway, with the Arlington community. So I just wondered, what is it that you most enjoy doing, or a couple of things that you really enjoy doing when you're not working?
One of the things that I particularly enjoy doing right now is spending a lot of time with my family. I have 2 teenage sons, and a lot of people roll their eyes when they hear that, but I think this age is pretty fun, and we're having an awful lot of fun together, while also having 2 teenagers and everything that comes with. Some eye rolling. I reserve the right for some eye rolling. But that's something that, you know, is just really a lot of fun right now. I'm with my husband and my 2 kids. I love to cook. I love to eat. And I'm recently, I love dancing in all shapes and forms, and I'm just recently insisting on taking time to bring it back into my life.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, and we, as we also know as veteran language teachers, that food is a wonderful way, another entree, so to speak, into understanding other culture, and certainly into motivating students to use language.
That is the number one. That is exactly how I motivated my own children to speak French when we were in France, and that's how we enter all of our travels anywhere. If it's just to another state or another region, it's what's the food?
So the last thing that I want to ask you is just wondering, or at least inviting you to address or state anything that you think would be of interest to our audience that we haven't covered, in terms of, you know, it's been a pretty deep and broad conversation. So there may not be, but yeah. Just in case you have something in mind that you'd like to share, or
I'm really excited to be in Arlington Public Schools, and I'm looking forward to Tuesday, to being here when the kids come and feeling the energy of the schools. And I'm really excited about standing back and learning. I'm pretty inquisitive. I like learning. What I loved about becoming an administrator was really having a district perspective and learning, what makes a community tick, what makes our schools tick, what makes our schools special, and that's a fun project. It's a great job to be involved in. So I'm looking forward to just learning and contributing.
Great. Well, I've genuinely really enjoyed talking to you, and not least because for somebody who has spent now almost a decade as an administrator, primarily, you clearly still have the awareness and the perspective. You come from a teaching perspective. You clearly are completely in touch with how things happen in the classroom, and how the idea that you are going to be in charge of empowering, enabling, helping teachers helping create conditions in which teachers can do their best work. I think comes from a place of truly understanding what that means. In your case, that's my sense, and I'm both impressed and very heartened by
thank
that.
you.
So, with that, that I have been speaking to Dawn Carney, who is going to be leading the World Languages program here in Arlington Public Schools, and we're glad of it. For her and for Talk of the Town, I am James Milan, and we will see you next time.